My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been driving for rideshare premium for about 3 years now. People always ask me why I chose this line of work, and honestly, the answer isn't simple. I'm 42 years old, and if you saw me behind the wheel of a black Lincoln Town car, you'd probably make assumptions about my life, my education, my circumstances. Most people do. They see a black man in a driver's uniform and think they know my whole story. They're almost always wrong. I grew up in Detroit, in a neighborhood where dreams were supposed to be small and realistic. My mother was a nurse, worked double shifts at Henry Ford Hospital, and my father taught high school mathematics until he passed when I was 17. They both believed in education with a fervor that bordered on religious. Every penny they could spare went toward making sure my sister and I had opportunities they never had. I was accepted to the University of Michigan full scholarship, where I majored in international business with a focus on Asian markets. But that's getting ahead of myself. This story isn't really about my credentials or my past achievements. It's about one ride, one woman, and one moment that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning in late October. I remember because the trees along Woodward Avenue were at their peak, all those brilliant oranges and reds against a steel-gray Detroit sky. I'd been up since 4:30, had already completed 2 airport runs, and was heading toward the financial district downtown to catch the morning rush of executives heading to meetings. The app pinged around 7:15. Pickup location was the Renaissance Center, one of those gleaming towers where the people who run the city's largest corporations make decisions that affect thousands of lives. Destination was the Detroit Institute of Arts, about a 15-minute drive depending on traffic. I pulled up to the designated pickup spot, checked my appearance in the rearview mirror out of habit, and waited. The app showed my passenger's name as Catherine Whitmore, 5-star rating, premium account. I'd learned over the years that ratings don't tell you much about how someone will actually treat you, but I always started each ride with optimism and professionalism. That's what separates good drivers from great ones. She emerged from the building exactly on time, which I appreciated. Catherine Whitmore was probably in her mid-40s. Blonde hair pulled back in a style that screamed expensive salon, wearing a navy blue suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. She had that particular walk that corporate executives develop, confident to the point of arrogance, heels clicking against the pavement like punctuation marks declaring her importance. She was on her phone, naturally, already deep in some conversation that apparently couldn't wait even for the 30 seconds it took to reach the car. I stepped out to open the rear door for her, as I always do. Professional service is about the details. She barely glanced at me, just slid into the backseat while continuing her phone conversation, her free hand making dismissive gestures that might have been meant as a greeting or might have been shooing away an invisible fly. I closed her door gently, returned to the driver's seat, and confirmed the destination on my app. "Good morning, Ms. Whitmore," I said, adjusting the rearview mirror to see her better. "We're heading to the Detroit Institute of Arts, is that correct?" She held up one finger without looking at me, still absorbed in her phone call. "No, Janet, I don't care what their timeline is. Our timeline is what matters. Tell them if they can't deliver the Q4 projections by Friday, we'll find another consulting firm that can. Yes, I'm serious, goodbye." She ended the call with a dramatic tap and finally acknowledged my existence with a look that would have frozen water. "Yes, the DIA, I have a board meeting at 8, don't make me late." "Of course," I replied, pulling smoothly into traffic. "We should have you there with time to spare." The first few minutes passed in silence. I kept my focus on the road, navigating the morning traffic with the efficiency that comes from knowing every street, every shortcut, every traffic light pattern in the city. In my peripheral vision, I could see her typing furiously on her phone, her face set in an expression of permanent irritation. I'd seen that look before on countless faces in countless rearview mirrors. People who live their lives in a constant state of low-grade anger at the world for not moving fast enough, not being perfect enough, not recognizing their importance sufficiently. We were about 5 minutes into the ride when her phone rang again. She answered immediately. Catherine Whitmore, yes, Brian, I got your email. No, I haven't had time to read it yet because I've been putting out fires since 6 this morning. What? No, that's unacceptable. We discussed this last week. Her voice was rising, taking on that particular edge that people get when they're about to make someone's day miserable. I don't care if it's technically challenging. That's what we pay you people for. Figure it out or I'll find someone who can. As she continued her conversation, her tone grew increasingly harsh. I'd learned long ago not to take these things personally. People like Catherine Whitmore existed in a different world, where everyone around them was either a tool to be used or an obstacle to be removed. Drivers, waiters, assistants, janitors, we were all just part of the scenery, barely human in their eyes. I'd made peace with that reality years ago, mostly, but then something shifted. She ended her call and immediately made another one, and this time the conversation took a different turn. Veronica, Catherine, listen, I need you to do something for me. You know that driver we interviewed last week for the company car position? The one with the impressive resume. Yeah, him. I need you to send him a rejection. Why? Because I have a rule, Veronica. I don't hire people who are going to make me feel uncomfortable. And yes, before you ask, that's exactly what I mean. I don't care how qualified he was. Find someone more appropriate. I'll know the right candidate when I see one. The way she said appropriate made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. I kept my face neutral, my eyes on the road, but something cold settled in my stomach. This wasn't just casual rudeness. This was deliberate, calculated discrimination spoken with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences for such decisions. She wasn't done. Another call, another victim. Michael, Catherine Whitmore, about the Evans account. I want you to transition it to someone else on the team. Who? I don't know anyone but Evans. Why? Because he doesn't have the right image for our corporate brand. He's competent enough, I suppose, but when we're pitching to clients in the gross point demographic, we need representatives who look the part. You understand what I'm saying? Good, make it happen by end of week. I'd been doing this job long enough to know when to speak and when to stay silent. This was definitely a stay silent moment. But inside, I was cataloging every word, every inflection, every casual cruelty. People like Catherine Whitmore never thought about how their words affected the invisible people around them. They never considered that the driver might be listening, might be understanding, might be remembering. Subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying this story. I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me your name and what city you're watching from. These stories need to be heard, and your support helps us share them with more people. We hit a red light at Grand Boulevard, and in the momentary stillness, I heard her sigh dramatically. Do you know how exhausting it is, she said, apparently to me this time, to constantly have to manage incompetent people. Every single day I have to clean up other people's messes. I swear if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. That does sound challenging, I replied neutrally. Years of customer service training kept my voice perfectly modulated, professionally sympathetic, without a trace of the anger building behind my ribs. Challenging, she laughed, sharp and bitter. Try impossible. The quality of workers these days is just abysmal. No work ethic, no sense of excellence, always making excuses. And don't even get me started on the diversity initiatives our HR department keeps pushing. As if hiring people based on quotas rather than merit is going to improve our company's performance. The light turned green. I accelerated smoothly, kept my breathing steady. She was baiting me now whether she knew it or not. Some people can't help themselves. They need to share their poison with everyone around them, need to ensure their misery has company. I'm sure you understand what I mean, she continued, her voice taking on a conspiratorial tone that made my skin crawl. You're in a service position, you must see it all the time. People who think they deserve things just because of who they are rather than what they can actually do. The entitlement is staggering. Everyone deserves respect and fair treatment, I said quietly, keeping my eyes forward. Regardless of their position, she snorted. That's very noble of you, very politically correct. But in the real world, in business, you have to make tough decisions. You have to choose excellence over sentiment. That's what separates successful people from everyone else. We were 2 blocks from the DIA now, 2 blocks from the end of this ride, from the point where I could drop her off and never think about her again. But those 2 blocks felt like miles, and Catherine Whitmore wasn't finished demonstrating exactly who she was. Her phone rang again. She answered with exaggerated patience. Yes, oh, for God's sake, no, tell him I'm not interested in his proposal. Why? Because I sat next to him at the charity gala last month and he spent the entire evening talking about his underprivileged childhood like it was some kind of achievement. I don't care where you came from, I care where you are now. And right now, he's not someone I want to do business with. Find me someone with the right background, the right connections. Someone who understands how things work in our circles. I pulled up in front of the Detroit Institute of Arts, a building I'd always loved for its classical architecture and the treasures it held inside. I'd spent countless hours here over the years, studying the Japanese prints in their Asian wing, the careful brushstrokes of masters who'd lived centuries ago. But Catherine Whitmore wouldn't know that. People like her never looked past the uniform. We've arrived, Ms. Whitmore, I announced, putting the car in park. You have 10 minutes until your meeting. Right on time. She gathered her briefcase and phone, preparing to exit. Then she did something that caught me completely off guard. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since entering the car and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. You know, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, you're actually quite good at your job, very professional. It's refreshing to see someone in your position who knows their place and does their work without complaint. You should be proud of that. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with meanings she thought I was too simple to understand. She reached into her purse, pulled out a $5 bill and placed it on the center console. Here, she said, buy yourself something nice, you've earned it. I stared at that $5 bill like it was a snake coiled on the console between us. The tip wasn't the insult, though $5 on a $15 ride was objectively cheap. The insult was everything else. The tone, the assumption, the casual condescension wrapped in what she probably thought was generosity. The way she said someone in your position like she was talking about a completely different species of human being. The way she thought a $5 bill and a pat on the head would make me grateful for her acknowledgement of my basic competence. But I didn't say anything, not yet. I simply nodded, gave her a professional smile and said, thank you, Ms. Whitmore. Have a good meeting. She stepped out of the car and I watched her walk toward the museum entrance, her heels clicking against the concrete with that same self-important rhythm. She didn't look back. People like her never do. They move through the world assuming everyone behind them is grateful for the privilege of having served them, never questioning, never doubting their own superiority. I sat there for a moment after she disappeared inside, my hand still on the steering wheel, staring at that $5 bill. 20 years ago, this moment might have broken something in me. The younger Marcus would have been angry, hurt, would have internalized her poison and wondered if maybe she was right, maybe this was all I was capable of, maybe all those degrees and accomplishments didn't matter in the face of what people saw when they looked at my skin. But I wasn't that Marcus anymore. I'd learned hard lessons about the world and about myself. I'd learned that people's prejudices said everything about them and nothing about me. I'd learned that success and worth aren't defined by the Catherine Whitmores of the world, no matter how much money they make or how many board meetings they attend. I picked up the $5 bill, folded it carefully, and put it in my pocket. Then I did something I rarely do. I opened my phone and took a screenshot of the ride details. A Catherine Whitmore 5-star passenger rating, completed ride to Detroit Institute of Arts. I saved the screenshot in a folder I kept for memorable rides, the ones that reminded me why I did this work, both the good and the bad. The app pinged with a new ride request before I could pull away from the curb. I accepted it automatically, my fingers moving with practiced efficiency. But my mind was elsewhere, traveling back through the years to explain how I ended up here. How a kid from Detroit with degrees from the University of Michigan ended up driving people like Catherine Whitmore around the city. After college, I'd landed a dream position with a major automotive supplier working in their international division. My Japanese language skills, acquired through 4 years of intensive study and a semester abroad in Tokyo, made me valuable. I was good at my job, better than good. I negotiated contracts with suppliers in Osaka and Tokyo, traveled throughout Asia building relationships, helped my company save millions through better communication and cultural understanding. I was on track for senior management, had a corner office in my sights, thought I'd figured out the formula for success. Then 2008 happened. The financial crisis hit Detroit like a tsunami. The automotive industry collapsed, suppliers went bankrupt, and suddenly my corner office ambitions were replaced by the desperate scramble just to find any work at all. I was laid off along with thousands of others, and despite my education and experience, despite my language skills and proven track record, I couldn't find another position in my field. The jobs simply didn't exist anymore. My wife, Keisha, was patient at first. We'd been married for 8 years by then, had a daughter, Maya, who was 6 years old. Keisha worked as a physical therapist, and her income kept us afloat while I searched for work. But months turned into a year, then 2 years, and the strain began to show. I took temporary positions, consulting work when I could find it, anything to contribute, but it wasn't enough. The rejection letters piled up, each one a little knife cutting away at my sense of self-worth. Then my father-in-law, who'd never thought I was good enough for his daughter anyway, started making comments. "Maybe you should think about something more stable," he'd say, "something practical. Not everyone is cut out for corporate work." The subtext was clear: I'd failed and I should accept my limitations and find some manual labor that matched what he thought I was actually capable of. Keisha defended me at first. But after 3 years of struggle, after watching our savings evaporate and our dreams postpone indefinitely, even she started suggesting I expand my options. The phrase was code for lower your expectations, for accept that maybe you're not who you thought you were. Our marriage didn't survive. The divorce was amicable, or as amicable as heartbreak allows. We both still loved each other, but love isn't always enough when financial pressure grinds down everything else. Acacia got custody of Maya, which was fair because I couldn't provide the stability a 10-year-old needed. I got weekend visitation and a 1-bedroom apartment in a part of town I'd never imagined living in. That's when I started driving. At first, it was just to pay bills, just temporary until I found something in my field. But the job market never recovered, not really, not for people like me. And somewhere along the way, I made peace with it. I discovered there was dignity in this work, a different kind of satisfaction than what I'd found in corporate boardrooms. I met interesting people, heard fascinating stories, learned the hidden rhythms of my city. I set my own hours, answered to no one, and had time to be present for Maya when she needed me. Plus, the job gave me something I'd never expected: perspective. Driving people around, you see humanity in all its varieties. You see the good and the bad, the kind and the cruel, the humble and the arrogant. You learn that money and success don't make people better, they just make them more of what they already were. A generous person with money becomes philanthropic. A cruel person with money becomes tyrannical. Catherine Whitmore had simply revealed what was already inside her, amplified by the power her position gave her. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And drop a comment telling me your name and city. I read every single one, and your stories inspire me to keep sharing these experiences. I completed 3 more rides that morning, all of them unremarkable in the best way. A college student heading to Wayne State, chatty and optimistic. An elderly couple going to a doctor's appointment, sweet and appreciative. A tired nurse coming off a night shift at Detroit Receiving Hospital who fell asleep in the backseat within 2 minutes, and I drove extra carefully to let her rest. So around 11, I took a break at a coffee shop I liked in Midtown, a little place called Red Hook where the baristas knew my name and my order. Large dark roast, black, no sugar. I sat at a corner table with my laptop, doing what I did most days during my breaks, studying. I was working through an advanced Japanese literature course I'd found online, reading Yasunari Kawabata in the original. The discipline kept my language skills sharp and my mind engaged. Just because I drove for a living didn't mean I'd stopped learning, stopped growing. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. She was 14 now, smart and beautiful and everything good in my life. Dad, can you help me with my algebra homework tonight? Mom's working late. I smiled and replied immediately. Of course, sweetheart. I'll pick up that Thai food you like and we can work on it together. This was my life. It wasn't what I'd planned, wasn't what I'd imagined during those ambitious years at Michigan, but it was mine and it was enough. I had my daughter's love, I had work that paid the bills, I had my studies and my interests and my dignity. People like Catherine Whitmore could look down on me all they wanted. Their opinions couldn't touch what mattered, or so I thought. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone pinged with another ride request. Pick up at a law office on Congress Street, destination Detroit Metropolitan Airport. It was a good fare, the kind drivers compete for. I accepted and headed downtown. The passenger was a lawyer named Robert Chen, no relation despite sharing my last name. He was Taiwanese-American, mid-30s, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase that screamed success. When he got in the car, he greeted me in English, then, noticing my name on the app, asked in Mandarin if I spoke Chinese. I'm sorry, my Mandarin is very limited, I replied in Japanese, but I'm fluent in Japanese if that helps. His face lit up. Really? That's fantastic. I studied in Tokyo for 2 years. It's been a while since I've had a chance to practice. We spent the entire 40-minute drive to the airport speaking Japanese, discussing everything from literature to current events to the best ramen shops in Detroit. He was impressed by my fluency, my vocabulary, my knowledge of contemporary Japanese culture. When we arrived at the airport, he gave me a generous tip and his business card. If you're ever looking for different work, he said, switching back to English, my firm could use someone with your language skills and cultural knowledge. We do a lot of international business, think about it. I thanked him, genuinely touched by the offer, but I'd learned not to get my hopes up about such things. People make generous gestures in moments of good feeling, then forget about them 5 minutes later. It's human nature, not malice, just the way the world works, but I kept his card. The next few days passed in their usual rhythm. Morning airport runs, midday corporate pickups, evening restaurant and entertainment trips. I logged my hours, maintained my 5-star rating, studied during breaks, and spent my evenings with Maya when I could. The encounter with Catherine Whitmore faded into memory, just another story in the collection of experiences that made up my working life. Then, on Friday afternoon, something unusual happened. I received a ride request from the DIA, the same pickup location where I dropped off Catherine Whitmore 4 days earlier. The passenger name was different, but the destination was interesting. The Renaissance Center, the exact reverse of Monday's trip. The passenger turned out to be a Japanese woman in her 60s, elegantly dressed in a way that suggested both wealth and refined taste. She carried herself with a grace that reminded me of my professors during my semester in Tokyo, that particular Japanese poise that comes from a culture that values composure above almost everything else. "Good afternoon," I greeted her in Japanese, opening her door with a slight bow. "Welcome, we're heading to the Renaissance Center." Her eyes widened slightly, the only sign of her surprise. "Your Japanese is excellent," she replied in the same language, settling into the back seat. "Where did you study?" "University of Michigan, and I spent a semester at Keio University in Tokyo," I answered, pulling smoothly into traffic. "Though I've continued studying on my own for many years since then. I can tell your accent is very good and your grammar is precise. That's rare among American speakers." She paused, studying me in the rearview mirror with frank curiosity. "Forgive me if this seems rude, but I'm intrigued. How does someone with your education and language skills end up driving cars for a living? That seems like a waste of talent." I'd been asked variations of this question before, usually by well-meaning people who couldn't reconcile what they saw with what they expected. I had my standard answer ready, the one about career changes and different paths, but something about her directness and genuine curiosity made me give her a more honest response. "The short answer is the 2008 financial crisis," I said. "I worked in automotive international relations until the industry collapsed. By the time things recovered, I'd been out of the field too long. And honestly, I've found unexpected satisfaction in this work. It allows me to be there for my daughter, to continue my studies, to maintain my dignity on my own terms." She nodded thoughtfully. "That is a very Japanese answer. Finding honor in any work well done, making peace with circumstances while maintaining one's inner cultivation. I approve." She smiled, and there was warmth in it, genuine respect. "My name is Yukiko Tanaka. I'm in Detroit visiting the DIA's Japanese art collection and consulting with them on an upcoming exhibition. It's one of the finest collections outside of Japan." "I know," I replied, unable to keep the enthusiasm from my voice. "I've spent many hours with those prints and scrolls. The Hokusai collection is particularly remarkable, and the Edo period ceramics are stunning. Are you involved in curating the new exhibition?" Her expression transformed from polite interest to delight. "You know the collection? Oh, this is wonderful." "Yes, I'm helping to curate a special exhibition of women artists from the Meiji period. It's a largely overlooked area of art history, but absolutely fascinating. Do you have a favorite piece in the current collection?" We spent the rest of the drive deep in conversation about Japanese art, literature, and culture. She told me about her work as a curator at the Tokyo National Museum, about the challenges of preserving historical artifacts in a rapidly modernizing society, about the importance of cultural bridges between nations. I shared my thoughts on contemporary Japanese fiction, my attempts to read Murakami and Yoshimoto in the original, my love for the precision and beauty of the language. When we arrived at the Renaissance Center, she seemed reluctant to end the conversation. "This has been one of the most intellectually stimulating conversations I've had in weeks," she said. "Would you be willing to meet me for coffee sometime? I would love to continue our discussion, and honestly, it would be refreshing to speak Japanese with someone who truly understands the nuances." I gave her my number, assuming it was a polite gesture she'd never follow through on. But the next day, Saturday, she texted me an invitation to meet at a tea house in Midtown. I admire that weekend, so I asked if my daughter could join us. Of course, Yukiko replied. I would be delighted to meet her. That tea meeting changed something fundamental in my life, though I didn't realize it at the time. Yukiko and Maya hit it off immediately. My daughter, who'd been studying Japanese culture in school and was fascinated by anime and manga, was thrilled to meet someone who could tell her about Japan from a genuine insider's perspective. Yukiko, in turn, seemed charmed by Maya's enthusiasm and intelligence. We talked for 3 hours, switching between English and Japanese, discussing art and literature and music and life. Yukiko told us about her late husband, who'd been a professor of comparative literature, about her 2 grown children who were scholars in their own right, about her philosophy of finding beauty and meaning in unexpected places. You remind me of my husband, she told me at one point. He also believed that cultivation of the mind and spirit was more important than career advancement or material success. He taught poetry at a small university, never sought fame or fortune, and died one of the happiest men I've ever known. There is wisdom in choosing contentment over ambition. Before we parted, she made a surprising request. I'm having a small gathering next Friday evening at my hotel. Just a few people from the museum and the art world, very casual. Would you both like to attend? I think you'd find the conversation interesting. Marcus and Maya. There will be another young woman there, my colleague's daughter, who's about your age and shares your interest in Japanese culture. I hesitated. It had been years since I'd attended any kind of professional or academic gathering. I'd spent so long in a different world, the world of service and labor, that I'd almost forgotten how to navigate the social spaces I'd once moved through easily. But Maya's excited expression made the decision for me. We'd be honored, I said. That week, I found myself thinking about the gathering more than I wanted to admit. I told myself it was just a casual get-together, nothing to be nervous about, but some part of me recognized it as something more significant. It was a door opening to a world I'd thought was closed to me, a reminder of who I used to be and who I might still become. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything, and it helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them. I picked up Maya on Friday evening and we both dressed carefully for the occasion. She wore a dress her mother had bought her for school concerts, navy blue with small white flowers, and I wore the one good suit I'd kept from my corporate days, a charcoal gray that still fit reasonably well. Looking at us in the mirror before we left, I felt a swell of pride. Whatever else had happened in my life, whatever wrong turns or setbacks, I'd raised a remarkable young woman. The gathering was at the Foundation Hotel, a beautifully restored building in downtown Detroit that had once been the old Detroit Fire Department headquarters. Yukiko had rented a private room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. When we arrived, there were about a dozen people already there, academics and curators and artists, all engaged in animated conversations. Yukiko greeted us warmly, introducing us to the other guests. There was Dr. Sarah Morrison from Wayne State University's Art History Department, a specialist in Asian ceramics. James Liu, a Chinese-American artist whose work explored themes of cultural identity. Dr. Kenji Yamamoto, a visiting professor from Osaka University. And several others, all brilliant, all engaged in work that mattered to them, all treating me not as a driver but as an intellectual peer. The conversation flowed easily, moving between English and Japanese depending on who was speaking. We discussed art and politics and literature and philosophy. I found myself contributing freely, drawing on years of reading and study, surprised by how much I'd retained, how sharp my mind still was when given the chance to truly engage. At one point, Dr. Morrison asked me about my background, and I gave her the honest answer, the whole story of career and crisis and unexpected transformation. She listened with complete attention, then said something that struck me deeply. Some of the most interesting scholars I know came to their work through unconventional paths. There's something to be said for living in the world, really experiencing it in all its varieties before trying to interpret it academically. Your perspective is valuable precisely because it's not purely theoretical. The evening was nearly over when something happened that would prove more significant than I could have imagined. A woman arrived late, rushing in with apologies about a board meeting that had run long. She was Asian American, probably in her late 50s, with silver-streaked black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Yukiko introduced her as Dr. Margaret Tanaka Chen, Director of Asian Cultural Studies at the Detroit Institute of Arts. Margaret is my niece, Yukiko explained, though she's accomplished enough that I usually let her stand on her own merits rather than trading on family connections. Margaret laughed. Aunt Yukiko is too modest. She's forgotten more about Japanese art than I'll ever learn. She turned to me and I saw recognition flicker in her eyes. Wait, Marcus Chen. Are you the driver who brought my aunt from the museum on Monday? She hasn't stopped talking about you all week. I felt my face warm. That was me, yes, your aunt is too kind. Not kind, just observant. She said you discussed Edo period ceramics with more insight than most of her graduate students. That's quite an endorsement. Margaret studied me with open curiosity. We actually have an opening at the DIA. We're looking for a program coordinator for our Asian cultural outreach initiatives. Someone who can help us build bridges with the Japanese and Japanese American communities, develop educational programming, assist with translation and cultural consultation. The pay isn't spectacular by corporate standards, but it's decent and the work is meaningful. Would you be interested in applying? The room seemed to hold its breath. Or maybe that was just me, my heart suddenly pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. A real job offer. Not charity, not pity, but a genuine opportunity based on my actual qualifications and skills. I would be very interested, I managed to say, keeping my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. Thank you for considering me. The next 2 weeks moved with a strange dream-like quality, as if I'd stepped through some invisible barrier into a parallel version of my life. Margaret sent me the formal job posting on Monday, and I spent that evening crafting my application with a care and attention I hadn't brought to such a task in years. My resume, which had sat dormant for so long, suddenly came alive again as I updated it with all the studying I'd done, the cultural knowledge I'd maintained, the skills I'd kept sharp despite having no professional outlet for them. I didn't tell anyone except Maya. Not yet. Hope was a dangerous thing, and I'd learned not to invest too much in possibilities that might evaporate. But my daughter's excitement was contagious, and I found myself allowing a small seed of optimism to take root. I still drove every day, maintaining my schedule and my professionalism. But now each ride felt different, as if I was seeing it all through a new lens. The passengers, the conversations, the quiet moments between pickups when I studied in my car, all of it felt like a chapter that might be ending soon. Not in a bad way, but in the way that all chapters end when it's time for something new to begin. On Wednesday of that week, I got a call from the DIA's Human Resources Department. They wanted to schedule an interview for the following Monday. My hands actually shook as I wrote down the details. This was real. This was happening. The night before the interview, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the years that had led to this moment. The successes and failures, the wrong turns and unexpected detours, the people who'd believed in me and the ones who'd written me off. I thought about Catherine Whitmore and her casual cruelty, her absolute certainty that she knew my worth based on nothing more than my current circumstances. I wondered what she'd think if she knew her driver was about to interview for a position that probably required more education and cultural knowledge than she possessed. But mostly, I thought about Maya, about being able to tell her that perseverance matters, that dignity and self-respect aren't determined by other people's judgments, that setbacks are just setbacks, not final verdicts on your life. Monday morning, I put on my best suit, the same one I'd worn to Yukiko's gathering. I stood in front of the mirror and gave myself a pep talk. "You belong here," I said to my reflection. "You've earned this opportunity, now go show them what you can do." The interview was scheduled for 10 o'clock. I arrived 15 minutes early, used the time to center myself, to remember who I was beyond the uniform and the driver's license. When they called my name, I walked into that conference room with my head high and my confidence genuine. The interview panel consisted of Margaret, the head of HR, and another senior curator. They asked about my background, my language skills, my understanding of Japanese culture, my ideas for community outreach and educational programming. The answers flowed easily because I wasn't pretending or exaggerating. This was genuinely who I was, what I knew, what I could contribute. At one point, Margaret asked me to discuss a piece from the museum's collection in Japanese, then explain how I would present it to a group of middle school students with no background in Asian art. I chose a Hokusai print, The Great Wave off Kanagawa, and found myself speaking with a passion I'd forgotten I possessed. I talked about the historical context, the technical skill, the way the image captured something eternal about humanity's relationship with nature's power. Then I shifted to English and explained how I'd make those concepts accessible to young minds, how I'd connect the artwork to their own experiences and interests. When I finished, Margaret was smiling. That was exactly the kind of approach we're looking for. Someone who can bridge the academic and the accessible, who can honor the art while making it relevant and engaging. The interview lasted 90 minutes. When it was over, they thanked me formally and said they'd be in touch within a week. I walked out of that building feeling lighter than I had in years, regardless of the outcome. I'd shown up as my full self, had been given the chance to demonstrate what I was actually capable of, and that alone felt like a victory. I had 2 rides scheduled that afternoon, and I approached them with a new energy. The first was a businessman going to the airport, uncommunicative and focused on his laptop. The second was an elderly woman heading to a doctor's appointment. She was nervous about some test results, and we spent the drive talking about her grandchildren and her garden and all the things that made her life meaningful. When I dropped her off, she squeezed my hand and said, "Thank you, dear. You have a gift for making people feel heard." That evening, I picked up Maya from her mother's house, and we went to our favorite Thai restaurant. I told her about the interview, about how good it felt to use my mind and knowledge in that way again, about the possibility of a new chapter. She listened with shining eyes, then said something that broke my heart and mended it at the same time. "Dad, I've always been proud of you. Even when other kids would say things about you being just a driver, I knew they were wrong. I knew you were brilliant and kind, and that you chose this work because it let you be there for me. But I'm so excited that you might get to do something that uses all of your talents. You deserve that." I had to look away to hide the tears in my eyes. 14 years old and wiser than most adults I knew. Subscribe to our channel if this story is touching you. Drop a comment with your name and city. Let me know you're out there listening. These connections matter more than you know. The call came on Thursday afternoon. I was between rides, parked outside a coffee shop, reviewing some notes for a Japanese literature discussion I participated in online. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Mr. Chen, this is Margaret Tanaka Chen from the Detroit Institute of Arts. I'm pleased to offer you the position of Asian Cultural Programs Coordinator. We were all very impressed with your interview and your qualifications." We'd love to have you join our team. The world stopped spinning for a moment, just stopped, then started again but different, brighter, full of possibility. I accept, I said, not even trying to hide the emotion in my voice. Thank you, Dr. Tanaka Chen, thank you for this opportunity. We discussed start dates and salary and logistics. The pay was less than I'd made in my corporate days, but more than I made driving, and more importantly, it came with benefits, stability, and the chance to do work that mattered. I would start in 3 weeks, giving me time to transition out of driving and prepare for the new role. When I ended the call, I sat in my car for a long moment, just breathing, just feeling. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when something locked tight inside you finally releases, when hope deferred finally becomes hope fulfilled. I called Maya immediately. Her scream of joy was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Then I called my mother, who'd never stopped believing in me even when I'd almost stopped believing in myself. Her quiet, "I knew you could do it, baby," made me cry all over again. I had one more ride on my schedule that day and I almost canceled it. But professionalism was habit by now, and besides, I wanted to savor these last few weeks of a job that had sustained me through hard years. Each ride would be part of the goodbye to this chapter of my life. The pickup was downtown, at a boutique marketing firm in one of the renovated buildings along Woodward Avenue. Destination was a restaurant in Grosse Pointe, about a 30-minute drive. I accepted the ride and headed over, my mind still swirling with excitement and plans and dreams. The passenger was a woman in her 30s, friendly and talkative. She was a graphic designer heading to a business dinner, and she spent the drive telling me about a rebranding project she was working on. I listened and engaged, asked questions, enjoyed the conversation. This was one of the things I'd actually miss about driving, the human connections, the glimpses into other people's lives. We were about 10 minutes from the restaurant when she got a phone call. "Hi, Janet. Yeah, I'm in the car heading to dinner. What's up?" A pause, then her expression changed, became more serious. "Wait," she said. "What? Are you serious?" "No, that's completely unacceptable. Did anyone report it to HR?" My attention sharpened, though I kept my eyes on the road. Something about her tone suggested this was more than ordinary office drama. "Listen," she continued, her voice low and angry, "I don't care how much business she brings in. Catherine Whitmore doesn't get to treat people like that. This is the third complaint this month. Someone needs to do something before she causes a real problem for the company." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Catherine Whitmore. The name was distinctive enough that it was unlikely to be a coincidence. Could this be about the same woman who'd ridden in my car, who'd made those calls revealing her true character? The designer continued her conversation, clearly upset. "I know the board loves her because she schmoozes well with clients, but she's creating a toxic environment. Half her team is looking for other jobs. And the things she says, Janet, you should hear the things she says. It's like she thinks it's still 1950. She ended the call and sat back with an audible sigh. "Sorry," she said, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. "Work drama. We have this executive who's brilliant at her job but absolutely terrible to work with. She's finally crossed a line and people are starting to push back." "That sounds difficult," I said neutrally. "It is, and the frustrating thing is that she's so charming to clients and board members. They have no idea how she treats the rest of us. She's got this whole different persona she puts on for people she considers her equals." She paused, then added, "Catherine Whitmore, you might have heard of her. She's on the board of several cultural institutions in the city, very prominent in certain circles." My heart rate picked up, but I kept my voice calm. "I may have encountered the name. She's involved with the arts community." "Yeah, she's on the board at the Detroit Institute of Arts, serves on some symphony committees, that kind of thing. Uses it for networking and status. But between you and me, I don't think she actually cares about art or culture. It's all about the social capital." The Detroit Institute of Arts. The same institution where I'd just accepted a position. The same institution where I'd be working with people who presumably had to deal with Catherine Whitmore in her role as a board member. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. We arrived at the restaurant and the designer thanked me warmly, leaving a generous tip. After she left, I sat in the car for a moment, processing this new information. Catherine Whitmore was on the board at the DIA, which meant there was a very good chance I'd encounter her again, but this time in a very different context. This time as a professional colleague, not as her driver. The thought filled me with a complex mixture of emotions. Anticipation, certainly. A sense of poetic justice, maybe. But also something like concern. Would she recognize me? Would it matter if she did? Would her presence on the board complicate my new position? I pushed the thoughts aside. I had 3 weeks before I started, 3 weeks to finish this chapter of my life with grace and professionalism. Whatever happened with Catherine Whitmore, I'd deal with it when the time came. My last 3 weeks of driving passed in a blur of mixed emotions. Each shift felt significant now, weighted with the knowledge that this chapter was ending. I found myself being extra attentive with passengers, extra patient with traffic, extra appreciative of the small moments of connection that had sustained me through the harder years. Some passengers I told about my new job and their genuine happiness for me was touching. Others I just drove in silence, letting them inhabit their own worlds while I quietly said goodbye to mine. Maya helped me prepare for the transition. We spent evenings researching the DIA's current exhibitions, reviewing Japanese art history, discussing ideas for community programming. She was more excited than I was, if that was possible, and her enthusiasm reminded me why all of it mattered. I was doing this not just for myself, but to show her that resilience pays off, that dignity and hard work and continuous self-improvement eventually find their reward. I didn't forget about Catherine Whitmore. How could I? The knowledge that she served on the board of my soon-to-be employer hung in the back of my mind like an unfinished melody. I did some discreet research and discovered that she was indeed prominent in Detroit's philanthropic circles. Her family had money going back generations, old Detroit wealth from automotive manufacturing and real estate. She served on multiple nonprofit boards, hosted charity galas, had her name on donor walls at various cultural institutions. The internet painted a picture of a successful, civic-minded executive and philanthropist, but I knew better. I'd heard the real Catherine Whitmore, the one who emerged when she thought only servants were listening, the one who made hiring decisions based on the right image and appropriate backgrounds, the one who dismissed competent people because they talked about their underprivileged childhoods instead of their country club connections. Part of me wanted to warn someone at the DIA. But warn them of what? That one of their board members was privately prejudiced. That she said terrible things in the back of rideshare vehicles. Who would believe a driver over a prominent philanthropist? And more importantly, would it matter? Powerful people like Catherine Whitmore were often protected by their positions and their wealth, insulated from consequences by the very systems they helped maintain. No, I decided. I would focus on doing excellent work in my new position. If I encountered Catherine Whitmore, I would handle it with professionalism and dignity. And if she recognized me, well, that might be its own kind of justice. My last day of driving was a Sunday. I'd planned it that way deliberately, wanting to end on a quiet note rather than in the middle of a hectic weekday. I drove just a few hours in the afternoon, mostly short trips around the city. My final ride was an elderly couple heading home from visiting their grandchildren, and they spent the drive telling me stories about their 50 years of marriage, the challenges they'd faced, the joy they'd found in simply staying together through it all. The secret, the husband told me as I helped him out of the car, is remembering that you're on the same team. When things get hard, you don't turn on each other. You face the problem together. I thought about Keisha, about how we'd failed at that, how the pressure had turned us against each other instead of toward each other. But I also thought about Maya, about how we'd managed to stay connected and supportive despite the divorce, how we'd kept our focus on being good parents even when we couldn't be good spouses. Maybe that was its own kind of success. I ended my shift at 6 o'clock, logged out of the app for the final time, and sat in my car watching the sun set over Detroit's skyline. The city looked beautiful in the golden light, all its rough edges softened, all its possibilities highlighted. This city had broken me and rebuilt me. It had shown me my limits and then helped me exceed them. I was grateful for all of it, even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. My first day at the Detroit Institute of Arts was a Monday in mid-November. I arrived 30 minutes early, too nervous to risk being late, and spent the extra time walking around the building's exterior, admiring the architecture, psyching myself up. This was real. This was happening. I was starting over, but this time with all the wisdom and resilience I'd gained from the years in between. Margaret met me in the lobby and gave me a tour of the facilities. The museum was stunning, room after room of treasures from around the world. But my heart sang when we entered the Asian wing, the galleries I'd visited so many times over the years as a guest. Now I'd be working here, helping others discover the beauty and meaning in these works, building bridges between cultures and communities. Your office is modest, Margaret said, opening a door to a small room with a desk, computer, and window overlooking the sculpture garden. But it's yours. We'll get you set up with credentials and email today, and tomorrow we'll start introducing you to the team and going over your responsibilities. I stood in that office, my office, and felt a wave of emotion so strong I had to blink back tears. It wasn't about the space itself, which was indeed modest. It was about what it represented, belonging, purpose. The chance to contribute something meaningful with my mind and my skills and my knowledge. The first week was a whirlwind of orientation and meetings. I met curators and educators, security staff and administration, all the people who made the museum function. Everyone was welcoming, curious about my background, interested in my ideas for expanding Asian cultural programming. I felt my confidence growing with each successful interaction, each moment where my knowledge and experience proved valuable. By the end of the week, I'd started to relax into the role. I was developing curriculum for school group visits, planning a lecture series on contemporary Japanese art, reaching out to Asian community organizations about partnership opportunities. The work was challenging and engaging, exactly what I'd been missing all these years. And I hadn't seen Catherine Whitmore once. Board meetings were monthly, Margaret told me, and the next one wasn't scheduled until early December. I had time to establish myself, to prove my competence, to become a valued member of the team before any potential confrontation with my former passenger. Please remember to subscribe and leave a comment with your name and city. I want to hear from you, want to know these stories are reaching people who understand why they matter. 3 weeks into my new job, Margaret stopped by my office with an invitation. We're having a donor reception on Friday evening. It's one of our major fundraising events, very formal, all the board members and significant donors. I'd like you to attend, start getting comfortable with that side of the museum's work. Plus, it's a chance to practice your schmoozing skills. I agreed, though the thought of a formal event made me nervous. I'd been out of that world for so long, wasn't sure I remembered how to navigate it. But this was part of my new role, and I needed to embrace all of it, not just the comfortable parts. I borrowed a tuxedo from a friend, got my hair cut, and showed up Friday evening trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. The museum's Great Hall had been transformed for the event, with white-clothed tables, dramatic lighting on the artwork, and servers circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The guests were exactly what I'd expected. Wealthy, well-dressed, the kind of people who wrote five-figure checks to cultural institutions without blinking. Margaret introduced me to several donors and board members. I shook hands, made small talk, discussed the museum's programming with practiced ease. It came back to me surprisingly quickly, the social skills I developed in my corporate days. I could do this. I was doing this. I was talking with a donor about the upcoming Japanese women artists exhibition when I saw her. Catherine Whitmore, across the room, holding court with a small group of admirers. She wore a burgundy dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, and her laugh carried across the space, brittle and performative. My stomach dropped. This was it, the moment I'd been anticipating and dreading. She hadn't noticed me yet, was too absorbed in her conversation. I had a choice. I could avoid her all evening, could stay on the opposite side of the room, or I could face the situation head-on. Before I could decide, Margaret appeared at my elbow. "Marcus, there's someone I want you to meet." Catherine Whitmore is chair of our board's Community Engagement Committee. Given your role, you'll be working closely with her committee on several initiatives. Come on, I'll introduce you. The universe's sense of irony was becoming increasingly apparent. Margaret led me across the room, weaving through clusters of guests. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face neutral, professional. This was a work event. I was a professional colleague. Whatever happened, I would handle it with dignity. Catherine, Margaret said, touching the other woman's elbow to get her attention. "I'd like you to meet Marcus Chen, our new Asian Cultural Programs Coordinator. Marcus, this is Catherine Whitmore, chair of our Community Engagement Committee." Catherine turned toward us, her professional smile already in place. Then she saw me, really saw me. And I watched her expression transform in real time, polite interest to recognition to shock to something that might have been panic. Her face went pale, and for a moment I thought she might actually drop her champagne glass. "Mr. Chen," she managed to say, her voice strangled. I didn't realize, Ms. Whitmore," I replied smoothly, extending my hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm looking forward to working with your committee on expanding our community outreach initiatives." She stared at my outstretched hand like it was a snake. The people around us were starting to notice the awkward pause. Margaret looked confused, glancing between us with concern. "Is everything all right?" Margaret asked. Catherine seemed to pull herself together, though her hand trembled slightly when she finally shook mine. "Yes, of course, Mr. Chen looks familiar. I thought perhaps we'd met before." "I don't believe we have," I said, the lie smooth and deliberate. "Not professionally, at least. I would certainly remember meeting the chair of the Community Engagement Committee." It was a gift I was giving her, and we both knew it. A chance to pretend our previous encounter hadn't happened, to start fresh in our new professional relationship. But the power dynamic had shifted completely. She knew that I knew who she really was, what she'd said, how she thought about people like me, and she had no idea what I might do with that knowledge. The rest of the evening passed in a strange haze. Catherine Whitmore excused herself shortly after our introduction, claiming she needed to speak with another board member. I watched her retreat across the room, saw her down her champagne in one gulp and immediately grab another glass from a passing server. She kept glancing in my direction all evening, her composure visibly shaken. Margaret pulled me aside after Catherine left. "That was odd. Did something happen between you two?" She seemed really rattled. I kept my expression neutral. "I honestly can't say what that was about. Perhaps she was just surprised by my qualifications. Sometimes people have certain expectations about what a program's coordinator should look like." Margaret's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Ah, I see. Well, for what it's worth, the board didn't hire you. I did, with the full support of our director and curatorial staff. Your qualifications speak for themselves, and if anyone on the board has a problem with that, they can take it up with me." The protective edge in her voice warmed something in my chest. It had been a long time since I'd had someone in a position of power willing to go to bat for me. The evening continued, and I found my rhythm again, networking with donors and board members, discussing programs and initiatives, being the professional I'd always been capable of being. Several people expressed genuine interest in the lecture series I was planning, and one donor even offered to sponsor a student scholarship program focused on Asian cultural studies. But through it all, I was aware of Catherine Whitmore's presence, the weight of her gaze whenever I glanced in her direction. She'd positioned herself at the opposite end of the room, maintaining maximum distance, but she couldn't seem to stop watching me. I wondered what was going through her mind, fear that I'd expose her. Shame at her previous behavior, calculation about how to manage this unexpected complication, probably all three if I had to guess. The event ended around 10 and I helped the staff with minor cleanup before heading home. I was exhausted but exhilarated, my mind racing with everything that had happened. I'd handled the Catherine situation perfectly, had maintained my professionalism while still making it clear that I remembered everything. The ball was in her court now. How she chose to play it would reveal a lot about her character. The next morning, Saturday, I slept in for the first time in years. No early morning airport runs, no alarm at dawn, just blessed rest. When I finally woke up around 9, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop to check my email. There was a message from Margaret sent late last night. Marcus, excellent work at the reception. You represented the museum beautifully, and several board members specifically mentioned being impressed by you, looking forward to working together on Monday. And below that, another email, this one sent at 2 in the morning. The sender was Catherine Whitmore. My hand hesitated over the mouse for a moment before I clicked it open. Mr. Chen, I hope you'll forgive the late hour and the informal nature of this communication. I feel we should speak privately before Monday's committee meeting. Would you be available for coffee tomorrow morning? There are things I need to say that would be better discussed in person. Please let me know, Catherine Whitmore. I read the email 3 times, analyzing every word, every implication. She wanted to meet privately, wanted to get ahead of whatever she thought I might do. The polite phrasing couldn't hide the underlying anxiety. She was scared, and she was trying to control the narrative before it controlled her. I could refuse. I could ignore the email, let her stew in her uncertainty, show up to Monday's meeting and see how she handled the situation without having had a chance to prepare. It would be a kind of justice, watching her squirm, wondering when and how I might reveal what I knew. But that wasn't who I was. Revenge, even justified revenge, corroded the soul. And I had worked too hard to get here, had overcome too much, to risk it all for the satisfaction of making Catherine Whitmore uncomfortable. I replied simply, Ms. Whitmore, I'm available tomorrow at 10. There's a coffee shop called Red Hook in Midtown. I'll meet you there. The next morning, I arrived at Red Hook 15 minutes early, claiming my usual corner table. The baristas greeted me with surprise and delight. They hadn't seen me much since I'd started my new job, and I'd missed this place, this small anchor of normalcy in my changing life. Catherine Whitmore arrived exactly at 10, and the contrast between this version of her and the woman I'd first met in my car was striking. No power suit today, just expensive casual clothes, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked tired, older, vulnerable in a way that almost made me feel sympathy. Almost. She ordered coffee and sat down across from me, her hands wrapped around the cup like she needed its warmth. For a long moment, she didn't speak, just stared into her coffee as if it might contain the words she was searching for. If you're still watching, please subscribe and drop your name and city in the comments. We're getting to the heart of the story now, and I need you with me. Finally, she looked up, met my eyes for the first time since sitting down. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. I've spent the last 2 days trying to figure out what to say, how to explain, how to fix this, and I keep coming back to the same realization. There's no good way to ask forgiveness for the unforgivable. I stayed silent, letting her continue. You were my driver 3 weeks ago, she said. I got in your car and I treated you like you were invisible. Worse than invisible, like you were just furniture, something to be used and dismissed. I made phone calls where I said terrible things, revealed terrible parts of myself, and I never once considered that you were a human being who could hear me, who could be hurt by what I said, who deserved basic respect. Yes, I said simply, all of that is true. She flinched but didn't look away. I've been thinking about who I've become, how I got here. I grew up with money, with privilege, with the assumption that certain people were just inherently better than others. My parents taught me that success was about maintaining the right image, associating with the right people, keeping the wrong kind of people at a distance. I absorbed those lessons completely, built my entire life around them. And now, I asked. And now I'm sitting across from someone I dismissed as beneath my notice who turned out to be more educated, more cultured, more genuinely accomplished than I am. Someone who speaks fluent Japanese, which I certainly can't do. Someone who was hired for a position I could never fill because I lack the actual knowledge and skills required. Someone who had every reason to destroy my reputation, but chose not to. I haven't chosen anything yet, I pointed out. You don't know what I'm going to do. She nodded. That's fair. You have every right to expose me, to tell people what I said, how I behaved. It would probably ruin me. The board would likely ask for my resignation if they knew. My company would face questions about my judgment and values. My reputation in the philanthropic community would be destroyed. She paused, then added, and I would deserve all of it. Yes, I agreed, you would. She absorbed that, then continued. But I'm not here to ask you not to tell anyone, though obviously I'd prefer you didn't. I'm here because I need to say this directly to you. I'm sorry. I'm deeply, profoundly sorry for how I treated you, for the things I said, for the person I revealed myself to be. There's no excuse for it, none. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance, but all I saw was genuine remorse, the kind that comes from having your worst self reflected back at you unavoidably. You want to know what hurt most? I asked. It wasn't the rudeness or the dismissiveness. I've dealt with that before. It was listening to you make decisions about other people's lives based on prejudice and image rather than merit. Hearing you reject qualified candidates because they didn't fit your narrow definition of appropriate. Knowing that you had the power to affect people's careers, their livelihoods, and you wielded that power based on the ugliest kind of bias. I know, she whispered. I know. Do you? Because here's what you don't know, I was that person once. The one who didn't get hired because someone decided I didn't have the right image. I had all the qualifications, all the experience, but I kept getting passed over for positions I was perfect for, and I could never prove it was discrimination because people like you are too smart to say it outright. You just find other reasons, other excuses. Catherine's eyes were wet now, tears threatening to fall. How do you not hate me? How are you sitting here having this conversation instead of destroying me? I thought about that question, really considered it. Because hate is exhausting, because I've spent too many years building myself back up to tear myself down with bitterness. Because you're not worth the emotional energy it would take to hate you. I paused, then added more gently, and because I have a 14-year-old daughter who's watching how I navigate the world. I want to teach her that dignity and integrity matter more than revenge. She wiped at her eyes, trying to maintain composure. What you said at the reception about looking forward to working with my committee, did you mean that, or was it just politeness? Both, I admitted. I am looking forward to the work itself. Community engagement is important and I have ideas that could really make a difference. But I'm not looking forward to working with you, not if you're going to be the same person who sat in my car 3 weeks ago. I won't be, she said quickly. Then more carefully, I mean I want not to be. So I'm going to work on that, on myself, on understanding why I think the way I do and how to change it. That's good, I said. That's necessary, but Catherine, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to be your redemption project. I'm not here to help you feel better about yourself or to absolve you of your guilt. I'm here to do excellent work for the museum and the community. If you want to change, do it for yourself and for all the other people you've harmed with your prejudices, not for me. She nodded, accepting the boundary I was setting. That's fair, more than fair. She hesitated, then asked, Can I ask what you're going to do? Are you going to tell people about what happened? I'd been thinking about this question since the moment I recognized her at the reception. I'm not going to actively expose you. What you said in my car was reprehensible, but it was also technically private, and I'm not interested in becoming known as the person who secretly records passengers or publicly shames them. I let that sink in, then continued, but I'm also not going to lie if asked directly. If someone questions your behavior or your judgment, I won't cover for you. That's more grace than I deserve, she said quietly. Probably, I agreed. But here's the thing, Catherine. You have an opportunity here that most people don't get. You've been confronted with the ugliness of your own prejudices in a way that's impossible to dismiss or rationalize. You can choose to learn from it and become a better person, or you can retreat into defensiveness and continue being who you've always been. That's entirely up to you. We sat in silence for a moment, the coffee shop bustling around us with its normal Sunday morning energy. Finally, Catherine spoke again, her voice small but sincere. I want to do better. I don't know how yet, but I want to try. Will you tell me if I mess up? In the committee meetings, I mean, if I say something or do something that reveals those old patterns, I considered the request. It would be exhausting to be her conscience, her moral mirror. But it might also be necessary for the sake of the other people she'd interact with through the museum. I'll hold you accountable professionally, I said carefully. If you make decisions that seem based on bias rather than merit, I'll question them. But you need to do your own work. Read, listen, educate yourself about your blind spots. Don't put the burden of your education on the people you've marginalized. I understand, thank you. She stood to leave, then paused. Marcus, for what it's worth, congratulations on your new position. From what Margaret said, you're already making an impact. The museum is lucky to have you. Yes, I said, they are. After she left, I sat there for a long time, processing everything that had happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. How did it go, Dad? I'd told her about the situation, about recognizing Catherine Whitmore at the reception. My daughter had been furious on my behalf, had wanted me to expose her immediately, but I'd explained my reasoning for handling it differently, and eventually she'd understood. I think it went as well as it could have, I texted back. She apologized, seems genuine. The time will tell if she actually changes. I'm proud of you, Maya replied. You took the high road even when you didn't have to. That's real strength. My daughter, teaching me lessons about grace and dignity. The world really did turn in mysterious ways. Monday's committee meeting was predictably awkward at first. Catherine was subdued, overly polite, clearly uncertain how to interact with me in this new dynamic. But as we got into the actual work, discussing initiatives and budgets and community partnerships, some of the tension eased. I presented my ideas for expanding Asian cultural programming, and to her credit, Catherine listened attentively and asked thoughtful questions. At one point, she suggested something that revealed her old biases, a proposal to focus outreach on established community organizations rather than newer immigrant groups. I challenged it directly but professionally, explaining why that approach would exclude the very communities most in need of cultural connection and resources. She paused, clearly uncomfortable, then said, You're right. I was defaulting to what's comfortable rather than what's effective. Let's revise that to prioritize organizations serving recent immigrant communities. It was a small victory, but it mattered. Change happens in small moments, in the choice to listen rather than defend, to adapt rather than insist. Over the following weeks, I settled into my new role with increasing confidence. The work was everything I'd hoped for and more. I developed partnerships with Japanese cultural organizations, created educational programming that brought Asian art alive for students, organized events that drew diverse crowds to the museum. I was using my mind, my knowledge, my language skills, all the parts of myself I'd maintained through the difficult years. Catherine Whitmore and I developed a working relationship that was professional if not warm. She seemed genuinely committed to changing her behavior, at least in our professional interactions. Whether that change went deeper, whether she was examining her prejudices in other areas of her life, I couldn't say. That wasn't my responsibility. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel and please share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me your name and city and let me know if this story resonated with you. 3 months into my position, the museum hosted the opening of the Meiji Women Artists exhibition that Yukiko had been curating. It was a triumphant event, drawing scholars and art lovers from across the country. Yukiko herself gave the opening remarks, and afterward she pulled me aside. Marcus, this exhibition wouldn't have happened without your work on the community partnerships and educational programming. You've helped us reach audiences we've never been able to connect with before. Thank you. That evening, looking around at the diverse crowd admiring these beautiful works by artists who'd been overlooked for too long, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was why I'd persevered through the hard years. This was why dignity and self-respect mattered more than other people's judgments. This was why you never let circumstances define your worth. Maya attended the opening with me, and at one point she squeezed my hand and said, "Dad, remember when I was little and you were struggling to find work? I remember you sitting at the kitchen table late at night, studying Japanese even though you didn't have a job that needed it. I asked you why you kept studying if it wasn't helping you get hired, and you said learning was its own reward. I didn't understand that then, but I do now." I had to look away to hide the tears in my eyes. Again, my daughter had a gift for seeing straight to the heart of things. Catherine Whitmore approached us later in the evening. She'd been at the exhibition but had stayed on the opposite side of the room, maintaining the careful distance that had characterized our interactions since that coffee shop meeting. But now she walked over deliberately, her expression uncertain but determined. "Marcus, I wanted to congratulate you on the exhibition's success. The programming you developed really made a difference in the turnout and diversity of the audience." She turned to Maya. "You must be Marcus's daughter. He talks about you often in meetings. You should be very proud of your father." Maya looked at her with the frank assessment only teenagers can manage, clearly trying to reconcile this polite woman with the story I'd told her. "I am proud of him," she said. "I always have been, even when other people couldn't see how remarkable he is." The comment hung in the air, pointed enough to make its meaning clear but polite enough to be deniable. Catherine's face colored slightly, but she didn't retreat. "You're very lucky to have each other," she said quietly. "Then to me, thank you for the work you're doing here. It matters more than you know." She walked away and Maya turned to me with raised eyebrows. "That was her, the woman from the car, that was her. She seems different than how you described her." "People can change," I said. "Or at least they can try to change. We'll see if it sticks." That night after I dropped Maya off at her mother's house, I drove through Detroit's streets, retracing routes I'd driven countless times as a rideshare driver. The city looked different now, or maybe I looked at it differently. These streets had witnessed my lowest moments, and my recovery had carried me through despair and back to hope. I thought about all the passengers I'd driven over the years, the good and the bad, the kind and the cruel. I thought about Catherine Whitmore and what she represented, the casual cruelty of prejudice, The way power can insulate people from the consequences of their own ugliness. But I also thought about Yukiko Tanaka, about Margaret Tanaka Chen, about Robert Chen, the lawyer who'd given me his card, about all the people who'd seen past the uniform to the person underneath. I thought about my daughter's unwavering faith in me, about my mother's quiet certainty that I would find my way. The story could have ended differently. I could have internalized Catherine Whitmore's contempt, could have accepted her assessment of my worth, could have let bitterness consume me. But I'd made different choices, had maintained my dignity and my self-respect even when the world seemed determined to strip them away. And now here I was doing work that mattered, using my education and skills, contributing something meaningful to my community. The path had been longer and harder than I'd ever expected, but maybe that was the point. Maybe the struggle had taught me things success never could have, about resilience and grace and the importance of defining yourself rather than letting others define you. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in my car for a moment, in this vehicle that had been my mobile office for 3 years. I'd be selling it soon, didn't need a premium car anymore. But I'd miss it, this space where I'd done so much thinking, so much growing, so much silent perseverance. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it and smiled. It was from Robert Chen, the lawyer I'd driven to the airport months ago. Marcus, I heard about your new position at the DIA. Congratulations. If you're ever interested in consulting work translating Japanese business documents, I've got projects I could use your help with. Great pay, flexible hours. Think about it, I would think about it. I'd learn not to close doors, not to assume I knew where opportunities might lead. Life had surprised me too many times for that. I got out of the car and looked up at the night sky, at the stars barely visible through Detroit's light pollution. Somewhere up there my father was watching and I hoped he was proud. I'd taken the education he and my mother had sacrificed to give me, had refused to let it go to waste even when it seemed irrelevant to my circumstances, had used it to build myself back up when the world tried to keep me down. Thank you, I said to the stars, to my father, to the universe, to whatever forces had carried me through. Thank you for the struggle and the strength. Thank you for the humiliation and the resilience it built. Thank you for Catherine Whitmore and the reminder that other people's prejudices are their problem, not mine. Thank you for the journey, all of it, because it made me who I am. And who I was, I realized was enough, more than enough. I was Marcus Chen, scholar and driver, father and survivor, a man who'd faced the worst and emerged with his dignity intact. I was someone who spoke 3 languages, who could discuss Hokusai and Kawabata with equal passion, who'd learned grace under pressure and the art of maintaining self-worth in the face of contempt. I was someone who'd been laughed at and looked down upon, who'd been dismissed and underestimated, but who'd never stopped knowing his own value. I was someone who'd turned a crisis into an opportunity, who'd found unexpected gifts in unwanted circumstances, who'd learned that the high road isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. The next morning, I woke up early not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, and started drafting a proposal for a new initiative, a mentorship program connecting young people from underrepresented communities with professionals in the arts and cultural sector. I thought about all the students who might need someone to believe in them, to show them that setbacks aren't final, that dignity and education and persistence can overcome almost anything. I would call it the Second Chances program. Because that's what I'd gotten and what I wanted to give others. A second chance to show the world who they really were, beyond the assumptions and prejudices, beyond the current circumstances, beyond what others could see at first glance. My phone rang, it was Margaret. Marcus, I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to catch you before you came in. The board had their monthly meeting last night and your name came up several times, very positively. They're impressed with your work, particularly the community partnerships and the exhibition programming. Catherine Whitmore actually made a point of praising your contributions. I smiled. That's good to hear. There's more. We're creating a new position, Director of Cultural Inclusion and Community Engagement. It's a significant promotion with a substantial salary increase and expanded responsibilities. The board voted unanimously to offer it to you, pending your acceptance, of course. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, unable to speak for a moment. 6 months ago, I'd been driving passengers around the city, wondering if I'd ever get another chance to use my education and skills. 3 months ago, I'd been grateful just to have an entry-level position at the museum. And now this, Marcus, are you still there? I'm here, I managed. I'm just yes, I accept. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for believing in me. You earned this, Marcus, every bit of it. See you tomorrow, Director Chen. I ended the call and sat there in my small kitchen, in my modest apartment, feeling richer than I'd ever felt in my life. Not because of the promotion or the salary, though those were wonderful, but because I'd proven something essential to myself. That who you are isn't determined by where you've been or what others think of you, but by how you carry yourself through the struggles, how you maintain your integrity when it would be easier to let it go, how you keep growing and learning and becoming even when the world tells you there's no point. I thought about Catherine Whitmore one last time, about that ride that had started all of this. If she hadn't revealed her true character that day, if I hadn't been forced to confront the reality of how people like her viewed people like me, would I have had the same determination to succeed? Would I have felt the same satisfaction in proving her wrong? Maybe everything happened for a reason. Maybe that humiliation was necessary, a catalyst for transformation. Maybe I needed to see the worst of humanity's prejudices to fully appreciate the best of humanity's capacity for growth and change. Or maybe I was overthinking it, trying to find meaning in what was simply an unpleasant experience that happened to lead to good outcomes. Either way, I was grateful for where I'd ended up, grateful for the journey that had brought me here. I called Maya and told her about the promotion. Her scream of joy made me laugh and cry at the same time. Dad, this is amazing. Can we celebrate? Can we go to that fancy restaurant you always said we'd go to someday? Yes, I said. Absolutely yes. We're going to celebrate properly. You've earned it too, sweetheart. Your faith in me helped carry me through the hard times. I love you, Dad. I'm so proud of you. I love you too, Maya, more than you'll ever know. That evening, as I got ready for dinner with my daughter, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone different than the man who'd started driving 3 years ago. Older, yes, but also stronger, wiser, more certain of his own worth. I'd been tested in ways I never expected, had faced humiliations and setbacks that could have broken me, but instead had refined me like gold in fire. I was Marcus Chen, and I'd learned the most important lesson of all. That dignity comes from within, not from others' opinions. That success is measured not by how high you climb, but by how you rise after falling. That grace under pressure is the truest mark of character, and that perseverance, education, and self-respect can overcome almost any obstacle. The woman who'd laughed at me in the back of my car, who dismissed me as beneath her notice, had inadvertently given me a gift. She'd reminded me of my own strength, of the importance of never accepting others' limited vision of who I could be. She'd shown me what I was fighting against, and in doing so, had fueled my determination to succeed. And succeed I had, not in spite of the struggle, but because of it. Every difficult moment, every humiliation, every rejection had taught me something essential about resilience and dignity and the unbreakable human spirit. As I drove to pick up Maya, taking these familiar streets one more time in my soon-to-be former car, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey wasn't over. There would be new challenges ahead, new obstacles to overcome, new lessons to learn, but I was ready for all of it. Because I'd learned the truth that would carry me through whatever came next. You are not what happens to you. You are how you respond to what happens to you. And I'd responded with grace, with dignity, with an unshakable commitment to my own worth regardless of external circumstances. That was my victory. Not the job or the promotion or the vindication of proving Catherine Whitmore wrong, but the internal triumph of maintaining my humanity, my compassion, my commitment to growth and learning and becoming the best version of myself. I pulled up in front of Keisha's house and Maya came running out, beautiful and brilliant and everything good in my life. She got in the car with a huge smile, and as we drove toward the restaurant, she said something that perfectly captured everything I'd learned. Dad, you know what I realized? Your story isn't about that mean lady getting what she deserved or you proving her wrong. It's about you never letting anyone else define who you are. That's the real lesson, right? That we get to decide our own worth regardless of what anyone else thinks. When did you get so wise? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. I learned from the best, she said simply. And in that moment, I knew that everything, all the struggle and pain and humiliation and growth had been worth it. Not just for me, but for the lessons I could pass on to my daughter, the example I could set about resilience and dignity, and the power of never giving up on yourself. We pulled up to the restaurant, the beginning of a celebration that marked not just a promotion but a transformation. A journey from despair to hope, from humiliation to triumph, from being dismissed to being recognized for who I truly was. The valet opened my door and I stepped out into the evening with my daughter by my side, ready for whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that I was enough, had always been enough, would always be enough. Because that's what I'd learned on this long, strange journey from the back seat of that car to the director's office at one of the country's finest museums. Your worth is not determined by your circumstances, but by your character. And mine had been tested and proven true. I was Marcus Chen, scholar, father, survivor, victor, and my story was just beginning. Thank you for watching, for staying with me through this entire journey. Please subscribe if you haven't already and drop a comment with your name and city. I want to hear from you, want to know if this story touched you, want to build this community of people who believe in dignity, resilience, and second chances. Your stories matter just as much as mine, and together we can remind each other that we're all worthy of respect, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Keep fighting the good fight. Keep believing in yourself. Keep rising no matter how many times the world tries to keep you down. You are enough. You have always been enough. And your best days are still ahead of you.